In June 2025, multiple people broke into ENHYPEN's home. On top of that, they came with cameras. Belift Labs said it caused the members extreme mental and physical suffering. Worst part of all is that it wasn't even the first time someone had crossed a line. Millions of people love ENHYPEN. Most of them do mean well, but some of them don't know the difference between loving someone and needing to own them. And for ENHYPEN, those people kept finding ways to get closer. If you enjoy thoughtfully made videos about ENHYPEN just like this, consider subscribing. In September 2024, someone managed to get a hold of ENHYPEN's personal flight information on a return from China. They created passenger profiles with Air China under the members' names, registered seats directly next to them, and disabled the seat change option so they couldn't move away. When staff tried to fix it at the airport, some seats couldn't be changed at all, with the members having to verify their own identities before they could sit somewhere else on their own flight. Someone had gone through all of that just to be in the same row as them. ENHYPEN had debuted 4 years earlier, in which they were selected by millions of people through a survival show before they played a single concert. However, airports became something to navigate rather than easily move through. The flight was a singular person with a plan, using private information to get much closer to ENHYPEN than they were supposed to. Jungwon had been giving out microphone keychains at a fan exhibit that same year just to surprise people, because ENHYPEN constantly popped into his thoughts. He'd said they were his everything. 2 weeks later, the whole group landed in Milan after a 16 to 17 hour flight. Too tired to turn cameras on, they did a voice-only anniversary live, discussed their goals for the future of ENHYPEN, and Heesung and Jake were somewhere off to the side dancing just for each other, while everyone else laughed too hard to finish their mints. Nicki said he hoped they'd still be together at their 20th anniversary. That same year, they'd written Highway 1009, the first song all 7 of them had ever written specifically for ENHYPEN. Sunghoon said when he wrote his part, he imagined going on an endless road trip with them, somewhere with no destination. Nobody mentioned whatever just happened with their China flight. They never really do talk about their side and what they experienced. Around the same time, back at Incheon, a woman walked directly alongside the group through arrivals. Staff didn't stop her for several seconds, only being pulled away when security finally noticed her. She never touched or attacked ENHYPEN, she was simply walking with them like she belonged there. However, it was enough to raise suspicion about how people view these idols. On August 20th, 2025, Jungwon and Nicki went live together. Nicki asked Jungwon if he had worked out that day. Jungwon said he hadn't, and that he'd just turned the live on as soon as he arrived. Then Jungwon stopped to think, wondering if he should say the true reason why he didn't work out. Eventually, he chose to, after Nicki encouraged him. Jungwon went on to add that, "Someone keeps taking photos at the gym, so I can't go." He said a photo of Sunghoon working out had already been posted online. Both of them followed it up by directly telling their fans not to film them in such private places. For a lot of ENHYPEN, working out is a time they get to relax, a time they get to improve their bodies and just turn off their brains. It's usually meant to be a time when they don't have to worry about presenting themselves as a perfect idol, or worrying about who could notice them at any given moment. However, this person was exploiting and diminishing ENHYPEN's free time. Jungwon had to hide out in his hotel room instead of going to the gym. Between all of these things, they were still performing, still flying to Milan, and still dreaming about their 20th anniversary. But wherever they tried to exist as people, rather than performers, other people found ways to ruin it for them. In 2024, Sunghoon said performing for ENHYPEN was the only time he showed them everything, that if either of them were to disappear, the whole thing would fall apart. And yet, ENHYPEN were taking photos and videos of them. Live streams are something no one told them to do. Sunghoon says he enjoys doing it and seeing what ENHYPEN have to say, that when he live streams for them, he isn't showing a perfect version of himself, it's just him. However, not all of ENHYPEN's live streams were like this. One time, Heesung went live from his hotel room in the Philippines. He just landed, eaten sambap on the plane, and was in a good mood. He chose to livestream for Engines, hoping to talk with them about kind of anything. He ended up discussing things like skincare and his hair and giving fans advice for school. He seemed genuinely happy to be there. 4 minutes in though, his phone rang. It wasn't someone he knew.
전화하지 마세요, 진짜로.
It rang again. The stream started freezing on the viewer's end, cutting out mid-sentence every time a new call came through. He'd answer a comment, laugh at something in the chat, and then stop.
그만하세요, 진짜. 몇 번째예요.
He kept trying, talking about TikTok trends, saying mahal kita to the Filipino fans watching, trying to stay present for the people who had actually shown up. The phone kept ringing.
맨날 좋게 얘기하니까 괜찮아 보여요? 그만하세요, 진짜.
17 calls total across 29 minutes. At the end, he told everyone watching to eat something delicious, think good thoughts, and have sweet dreams. Then he waved goodbye. He'd opened the live happy. He closed it having spent nearly half an hour managing someone who wouldn't stop, while trying not to let the people watching feel it. Hee-sung wasn't even the only person to experience something like this. October 10th, 2025. Jae's phone had been ringing since before he properly started. He ignored the first few calls, switched to a company phone to keep the live stream running, and kept talking. Then he stopped, looked directly into the camera, and said the caller had already wasted 10 minutes he could have spent with the people actually watching.
I don't know who you are and I even don't care about you, but if you keep calling me like this, it's really bothering me and it's really annoying to do my communication with my fans, and you already waste my 10 minutes that I can communicate with my fans during my live. So congratulations if you got what you want.
March 9th, 2025. Sunghoon started a live from his hotel room and quickly began receiving calls. He told this person he wouldn't pick up even if they kept going, but they kept trying. Sunghoon loves doing live streams with the engines he cherishes so much, but this one was destroying that for him. Jungwon ended up asking Sunghoon if he could join the live too. He called in from his own room, and immediately his phone started ringing too.
아니, 전화가 엄청 오네.
Sunghoon advised him to turn on Do Not Disturb. Jungwon did, but somehow the calls still came through. Jungwon said that when someone calls during a live stream, he gets so angry he can barely stand it. But a Weverse Live is a space only for Engine, so he stays quiet. He doesn't say anything. He just tries to keep going. To be completely honest, dealing with someone who just persistently bugs you is exhausting. It's something everyone has dealt with in some sort of way. Whether you're an idol or not, I'm sure you can understand the irritation that comes with asking someone to stop, but watching them continue it anyway. In ENHYPEN's case specifically, it's having to manage someone else's refusal to respect a line you drew, over and over, in a space you built specifically for the people who actually show up for you. Jae said it quite plainly, that whoever kept calling had already wasted 10 minutes he could have spent with the people watching. 10 minutes of real time he cherished with Engines, being taken away by someone who decided that loving an idol in this way meant they deserved something from them. ENHYPEN built their entire career around a mythology of transformation. But what's so interesting is how well it parallels their own lives as idols. You get chosen, you cross a line, and the person you were before is just gone. That was the vampire world, and they'd been living inside it since debut. 5 months after debuting, they repeatedly won with their new song Drunk Dazed. Before Island, nobody knew them. Sunwoo couldn't fully explain why people loved him. He wasn't sure who he even was yet, but somehow, millions of people now knew their names and cherished them. Hee-sung wanted to be an idol since he was 6 years old, and roughly a year into actually being one, he said he was having a really hard time, that he didn't know anything, was young, and was fragile. Just from 1 month during their Border Carnival promotions, they listed some of the things they'd filmed. Jungwon mentioned the music shows, fan cams, the mini Olympics, behind the scenes content, Weekly Idol, and Hidden Track. After going through all of it, he just said, "There are so many." Not in a proud way or bragging that they do so much, just acknowledging it. Every one of those videos was a version of themselves that they'd agreed to show. By the time someone got inside the dorm with a camera, hundreds of those versions already existed. However, the footage from inside the dorm was something they hadn't consented to. The whole vampire mythology was always more literal than it seemed. Once you've been chosen on live television by millions of strangers, you can't be unchosen. It's the exact same way vampires can never transform back after being bitten. The person who could walk through an airport or a mythological village without anyone looking twice is just gone. And some of the people who voted for them never stopped feeling like that vote meant something personal. Some of them will love you for the person you show them, and some of them will decide that love is the same thing as permission. And by 2025, someone had already been inside the room they slept. On March 5th, Blift Lab posted a notice warning that people had been bribing delivery drivers to get inside the building, trying to film the members and sell the footage. In the same post, Blift Lab seemingly refers back to the situation with Air China. They attempt to remind everyone that conduct like that is strictly prohibited, and the person who sold that information had been prosecuted. 4 months later, they posted another notice nearly at midnight. Multiple people had gotten inside ENHYPEN's dorms with cameras, all while the members were home. These people were filming them secretly until they were caught and arrested on the spot on charges of housebreaking and stalking. The notice addressed it as reaching an intolerable level. This sort of thing was a repeated problem, that even with Blift warning these engines, they were still persisting and ramping up in their severity. That had been instilling fear, and that the psychological and physical harm to the members was at an extreme. On top of all of that, they were also selling their information. Phone numbers, home addresses, personal data, literally anything tied to them was being traded online. A literal market built around knowing where ENHYPEN slept. 4 days after the dorm incident and Blift's warnings, someone intercepted a package outside Heesung's door, photographed the address label, and posted it. As it spread, Engine spent hours mass reporting every account that spread it. Hybe, the parent company of Blift Lab, even set up a website designed exclusively for people to report online misconduct regarding their idols. On September 23rd, ENHYPEN landed in Milan as Prada ambassadors after a long flight. Still in their travel clothes, they walked straight into a mob the moment they came through the terminal. There were fans pushing from every direction, with phones shoved directly in their faces. The older members, Heesung, Jae, and Jake, pulled Sunwoo, Jungwon, and Nikki into the center of the group, forming a tight circle around them while the crowd kept pushing in. Sunwoo got hit. Jae got pushed aggressively. They were supposed to be arriving in Italy for a Prada fashion show, but their welcome from Engine was anything but warm. The Frankfurt layover on the way there had already given them a preview. Jake, who doesn't lose his patience easily, turned around to face the crowd pushing into the group and asked, "What are you doing?" It wasn't so much of an angered expression, but more of something from being confused. These were Engines, the people they loved so dearly, and they were stepping far beyond a comfortable boundary, one that you'd expect to just be natural. Jungwon had developed a bit of a habit of telling Engine on Weverse that he or ENHYPEN arrived safely after a flight. However, that night, he didn't post anything. Truthfully, it wasn't a safe arrival, even if the plane touched down just fine. Even more recently, Sunghoon arrived back in South Korea after a solo schedule in Shanghai, and 3 or 4 fans rushed him the moment he walked out, chasing him through the terminal while 2 staff members trailed behind him. Those Engines tried to shove their way into the same elevator, but yet a week later, he was on the comeback live, telling Engine he hoped they'd stay healthy and not catch a cold. Jungwon had described the feeling of being an idol as realizing something you thought was a blessing was actually a form of oppression. They released a whole song about that exact tension. Blessed Cursed doesn't try to resolve however they felt about being an idol. They weren't even claiming to have figured anything out. They were just done letting someone else decide how they have to live their lives. The choreography was deliberately sharp and powerful for that reason. It was meant to look like people who had chosen to take control of their days rather than wait for permission. In May 2026, Jungwon appeared on a YouTube show and started talking about the members. He said he feels more comfortable with them than with his own family, that his mom was a little hurt hearing that. Through all of the persistent harassment, nobody got close to the thing that actually mattered most to him.
힘이 제일 중요해. 그러니까 엔하이픈이 아닌 정원은 아무런 그게 없지.
왜?
엔하이픈이니까 잘 된 거지.
This was after people breached his dorm, after what happened in Milan, and after people repeatedly called his phone. Yet, after all of it, what Jungwon said about his life was that the thing worth protecting was still intact. None of the people who invaded those spaces got to write what his life looked like. That part was always his. Jungwon also gave us a bit of an answer as to how they can still wish engines the best, even when they've repeatedly broken their trust. On one of his days off, he went to the company building just to go live for Engine. He sang EXO covers and talked with the viewers until he decided to address the people he knew were standing outside.
여러분 그 앞에 기다리지 마세요. 진짜 기다리지 마세요. 기다리면 엔진 아님. 진심이에요. 이게 라이브 할 때마다 기다리더라고. 너무 직원분들한테 약간 민폐니까 다른 분들도 오고 못 와서 안 오는 게 아니잖아요. 저희를 이제 생각해서 안아주시는 거니까.
The people who held back out of respect are the ones they appreciate. Watching the members through a camera is only fine when they set it up for themselves. Joining in on those live streams is a great place for ENHYPEN to interact with Engine. But when it's an interaction outside of their control, it becomes a problem. Earlier, when Jay was being spammed with calls, he labeled that fan as someone who wasn't an Engine, not because of who they were, but because of what they chose to do. ENHYPEN already have a song that extends this idea. Day 2 puts Jake alone in a dark room, staring at his phone with a cursor blinking on an empty notes page, asking himself how he's supposed to live tomorrow, and where he's even supposed to begin. Day 1 had been written for them. The actions of others tore ENHYPEN apart, so much to a point they felt like they were being oppressed. People subconsciously decided that they were owed something from ENHYPEN. However, Day 2 was just an empty page, and what Jake chose to do with that empty page dictated how they'd continue to live. I won't let someone else write for me. I'll write what my Day 2 will be. If you want to see how ENHYPEN drifted away from the sound that made them so successful and returned to it in a brand new way, you can click the video on the screen. And if these thoughtful breakdowns help you love ENHYPEN more, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching! Bye 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 bye.